Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into today's source material, a really profound homily from Father Joel Jomarsis Gaddis. Now, regardless of your religious background, the human behavioral concepts he breaks down here, they are absolutely universally relatable. We're looking at the stark difference between simply knowing something and actually doing it. He makes the case that we fall into this trap all the time, confusing passive knowledge with active transformation. And he uses everything from hilarious childhood stories to modern critiques to make his point.
So, Father Gaddis hooks us right off the bat with a pretty funny question. Picture this. You go to the gym, you sit down on a bench, and you just stare at a dumbbell for an hour. Are you going to lose weight? Or what if you just stand perfectly still on a treadmill? Will your stomach shrink? Obviously, no way. You can stare at those weights all day long, but until you physically pick them up and actually engage your muscles, literally nothing is going to happen. It's a hilarious mental image, right? But it perfectly sets up his main thesis. Just being near the tools of improvement does not equal actual improvement.
To really drive this point home, he shares these amazing childhood anecdotes about, well, let's call them creative learning methods. He mentions seeing a video of a kid pretending to literally scoop words out of a book and pour them onto his head. And then he talks about his own grandmother. She used to tell him to sleep with his study notes right under his pillow, thinking the answers would just magically enter his mind while he slept. Well, when that didn't work, his grandfather suggested an even crazier shortcut. He had him literally eat his study reviewer. Like, they cooked it into a bowl of porridge and he ate it. The result? He still failed the test. The only difference was he failed with a full stomach. It really just goes to show our comical desire to bypass the hard work and just absorb results through literal osmosis.
And this perfectly illustrates a core human problem. We want the results, but man, we absolutely hate the process. It's like this deep-seated tendency we all have. We want the reward without making any of the sacrifices. We want the shiny diploma without the late-night studying. We want wealth without the exhausting work. Or maybe we desperately want a happy, harmonious family life, but we completely refuse to do the hard, messy, emotional work of actually forgiving one another. We absolutely love the idea of the destination, but we totally resent the journey it takes to get there.
This exact desire for a shortcut often shows up as everyday hypocrisy, especially in religious life. The homily uses some really striking examples here. Think about someone who displays a Bible prominently right next to their bed, but they're actively engaged in infidelity. Or consider the person who hangs a rosary from their rearview mirror, basically treating it like an aesthetic decoration, while they are aggressively cursing out other drivers in traffic. The crucial takeaway here is that people love to rely on passive symbols of faith. They treat these objects like magical good luck charms, while their actual day-to-day behaviors completely contradict the very values those symbols represent.
Now, looking at the biblical foundation, the Gospel of Matthew offers a really direct warning about this. Simply calling out to God is entirely insufficient. Father Gaddis actually modernizes this concept in a brilliant way by comparing it to our social media habits. Merely liking an inspirational post, sharing a deep quote, or just verbally expressing admiration for a religious figure, that's basically the modern equivalent of just saying, "Lord, Lord." It's entirely passive. The text makes it incredibly clear that achieving true spiritual fulfillment requires actively doing the will of God, not just vocally admiring the idea of it.
To further illustrate this, the source material brings up the story of the two builders from the Gospel, the wise builder and the foolish builder. And the most critical thing to realize here is what they actually have in common. They both had the exact same access to the information. They both heard the exact same words. So the dividing line between success and total disaster had absolutely nothing to do with their level of knowledge. The wise builder survived the severe storms because he actively applied the information. He built his foundation on solid rock. But the foolish builder? He heard the exact same advice but did nothing with it, built his house on sand, and it completely washed away. Having the information alone could not save him.
Which brings us to this incredibly striking quote from St. Augustine. It perfectly summarizes this vast chasm between just possessing knowledge and actively living it out. He says, "It is one thing that you know the way, and another to walk the way." It's such an elegant way to frame it. You can memorize the entire map, you can point out the destination to everyone around you, but if your feet never actually hit the dirt, your knowledge of the path is fundamentally useless to your own progress.
Let's look at a super relatable modern metaphor from the homily. Taking medicine. Think about it. Step 1, simply holding a bottle of pills in your hand isn't going to cure your illness, right? Step 2, meticulously reading the label and totally understanding the chemical composition, still not going to heal you. Step 3, posting a selfie with the medicine to show all your followers you have it, yeah, that definitely won't make you better either. The only way the healing process actually begins is step 4,
internally consuming that medicine on a regular, consistent basis. And the homily argues that spiritual teachings operate on that exact same principle.
So we arrive at this really fundamental equation. Information without action does not equal transformation. Hearing the word, whether that's this homily, a great lecture, or just some really solid life advice, is literally only the starting line. Filling your head with data points and moral guidelines is not going to alter the trajectory of your life unless you put in active, repetitive effort. True transformation requires the daily, sometimes uncomfortable friction of applying what you know to how you actually live your life. And that repetitive effort leads to a really fascinating concept, spiritual muscle memory. Think about how professional athletes train. They practice the exact same motions thousands and thousands of times, so that in the heat of competition, their body just reacts automatically. Well, the source argues this is exactly what Christians need to do with their faith. By repeatedly practicing good actions, you build up that spiritual muscle memory. Because if you don't do this, what happens when a sudden life crisis hits? You'll just automatically default to your old, familiar habits. Under pressure, you'll default to sin rather than relying on your faith. Now, to prove that this internal transformation is actually happening, the homily introduces a great technical analogy about feedback. Think about your everyday electronics. How do you know your cell phone is actually working? It makes an alert sound. How do you know an air conditioner is blowing air? You might see those little tied ribbons fluttering on the vent. Or a computer, you know it's processing because the lights are glowing. These devices provide tangible, sensory feedback to prove they are operational. And the argument here is that a functioning faith has to do the exact same thing. It has to produce visible, positive actions that serve as real, tangible feedback to the world.
Which leads to a pretty blunt conclusion about our own internal hardware. If you have the physical capability and you have all the right data downloaded, but no actionable feedback is actually being produced, the entire system is effectively garbage. Seriously, if a machine has all of its parts but completely refuses to execute its actual function, you just throw it away. The homily uses this really strong imagery to warn against becoming just a storage vessel, someone who holds all the right spiritual information but produces zero outward benefit to themselves or anyone else.
As we near the end of this explainer, we hit a really decisive concluding thought straight from the homily. Talk is cheap, but actions are priceless. Claiming to believe something is incredibly easy. Literally anyone can say the words or repost an inspirational quote. But ultimately validating that belief through tangible, continuous, real-world effort, that is where the true value lies. It's the action that validates the belief, never the other way around.
Finally, Father Gaddis turns the spotlight entirely onto the audience with this lingering, deeply provocative question. Of all the homilies you've heard, of all the advice you've consumed in your life, has anything actually changed in you? It's a question that really challenges us to look in the mirror and confront our own passive consumption of knowledge. Are we just eating the study notes and hoping for the best, or are we actively walking the path? Keep that in mind as you go about your day. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. Keep learning, but far more importantly,